All right, so again, bouncing into card account setup and maintenance. And we're going to start by talking a little bit about the difference between setting up an account and setting up system users. When you're setting up an account, you are requesting a card account be opened and that a card be sent. Could be plastic or virtual. And basically, you're setting up that card holder. Now, when you're setting up a system user, like we talked about in the class last week, you're just setting someone up to be able to log into Access Online. So these two things are typically separate from one another. It is possible to create an account and then attach it to an existing user profile. And we can talk a little bit more about that at the end if there are questions. But today we're going to focus on setting up and maintaining card accounts. So we'll jump right into it because we have a lot to cover. So to create a card account, you will go to the System Administration area from your home page. And under System Administration, you can see there's several different options here. We'll talk about some of these other options, but we're going to start with creating a new cardholder account. And once you've clicked that link, the first thing you'll see is the step 1 here of 4, and it is to define your product settings or your card type. So here's where you would choose, purchase card, travel card, one card. If you only have one card type in your program, it will default for you. And then you need to select the hierarchy where this card account should belong within your organization. So if you know your company number, which is basically the managing account level, which is one step up from the cardholder level, eventually you might know that company number. It's a 5-digit number. You can enter it here. Division and department are not frequently used, so they're marked as optional. But if you don't know which hierarchy to select, you can click the search link, which will take you to a search page. And again, based on the managing account structure, as the next level roll up from the card account level, the hierarchy does default to company for the search, but you can change it to higher levels as well to include all of your hierarchies. So you don't have to fill in any of this information. You can just simply choose your hierarchy level and then click search. And you'll see some hierarchy results here. Now, the numbers that go with these hierarchies are the bank's basically terminology for your structure. So if you want to see your own terminology from within your organization of these hierarchies so that you'll know which one you're picking, you can click this Show All Hierarchy Names link. And then the names of the different hierarchy levels that you're familiar with will show here so that you know you're picking your correct hierarchy. So you'll use the radio button here to select your hierarchy and then click Confirm. And then there's a couple more options here on this first page. The default is that the card is assigned to an individual and not a group, but you do have the option to change that. And also it is defaulted to send a physical card. If you're opening a virtual account, you can change that to no as well. And then you'll click Next to go to step 2. So step 2 is to actually create this new account. And you'll see all the information that you just selected here across the top. And then the first step before you'll actually get into entering the information is that you'll have an opportunity to select a template. Let's see, we have a question. And Martha says, can we be doing this right now if we already have our Access Online set up, or is this something we shouldn't be doing yet? Martha, that's a great question. And you can follow along and set up an account along with me in your own system if you would like to. That is totally up to you. As far as I know, there's no restrictions on any type of activity like that. If you're not sure, maybe ask your next level up, but everything in the system should be set up for you to go ahead and proceed. Great question, thank you. Now, the templates are something we're going to talk a little bit more about towards the end, but basically you can create a template and it will automatically populate multiple fields for you. For instance, if everyone has the same business address, then you would have the opportunity to enter that address into a template, and then you can use the template to populate it instead of having it entered in each time. And then Ashley asks, I know it's being recorded, but will the slides be available as printouts? Ashley, I did send out the slides right before this session. If you want to hang on at the end, then I can get your email address and make sure that you receive those. Great questions, everyone. Thank you. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about templates shortly. So right now we're going to look at filling out our account information form here. So below the template selection is the first section of information, and it's account owner's information. Now, there's optional fields in each of the sections going down this page. You can click this link here, show all optional fields, to display all of those at once, or you can just open them as you go through the sections. We're going to open them as we go through the sections on an as-needed basis. And each of the sections can be expanded and collapsed then using the plus and minus signs here at the header of each section. Carla asks, if I make a template for our office, will any PA in our office see the template? Carla, there is some ability to share templates. Basically, you would create the template on a particular hierarchy level, and then anyone who is a PA with account setup ability in that part of the hierarchy would have access to that template. Great question. So we'll start by entering our account owner's information. Now, this line here that says organization name optional, this is actually what would be printed or embossed on the card if you type anything into this field. So you may want it to have the account number on the card, and then the card owner's name, and then state of Colorado or whatever. Some organizations put for business use only in this field so that is embossed on the card. If you don't have a need for any third line embossing on the card, then you can just leave that field blank. And then starting to scroll down the page, we come to the address section. And it's a good idea for the cardholder to know what address is being entered here, because if they call into customer service for assistance, or if they're purchasing fuel at the pump, they will be asked for a zip code or an address for verification. And this address that you're entering here is the address that they will need to give. So all the standard contact information will go here. And Melanie asks, is there an option for the organization name to be pre-populated? Melanie, yes. If you fill out a template, that will be a field that you could enter into your template, and it would pre-populate once you apply the template, yes. Underneath these contact information fields, there are two optional fields here, and they are labeled optional 1 and optional 2 so that you can use them for whatever you want. Some organizations like to collect a department name or some type of maybe project name or general ledger information, something of that sort here. So you can use those fields for any additional data on your card accounts that you'd like to be able to pull in reporting down the road. Again, if you don't have any need for that type of information, you can just leave those blank. Now, under the optional fields, this one's a little tricky. The employee field is a required field. So many organizations like to capture an employee ID of some sort, and that's why we've put it in there. If you don't have a need to capture anything additional of that nature, then you can just put the employee's last name again in this field to fulfill the data requirement. Okay, Kay asks, if testers are used using personal address during the registration of a card, can they change the work address and have that as the default? Yes, Kay, they can. If they have registered their card using a personal address, they do have the ability under the My Personal Information section to go in and change that work address at any point. And John says, our screen shows SSN. Is that a required field? John, if the SSN field does not say optional next to it, then it would be required. Typically, it is not, especially for centrally billed. That might be under, are you seeing that, John, under optional fields or up above? And let me know if that's optional or not, and that will be our answer. And then Wendy asks, for one card centrally billed, should the addresses all be the same? That's up to you. It would probably be a good idea to make the addresses the same, but if you wanted it to relate to the particular cardholder's location for mailing purposes, then you would want to put in that cardholder address where they will receive the card as well. SSN is in the account owner's information section. Okay, thank you, John. That may be a field that State of Colorado is requiring. These screens that I'm showing you are from our demo system, so that's why the difference. Thank you for clarifying that. All right, so scrolling a little bit further down this section, there are some optional fields. The Social Security number field normally appears here. It sounds like you all are set up just a little bit differently. There's also some additional fields that are related to things like event planning and some additional alternate contact information fields here as well. Michelle Garcia lets us know Colorado is using all 9s. For Social Security, we are not using personal Social Security numbers. Thank you, Michelle, for that. So in that SSN field, you would put all 9s. Scrolling a little bit further down, we've got the next section, and it is legal information. Now, the only thing that needs to happen here is that we do, as part of federal banking regulations, need to collect the legal name of anyone who's issued a lending product, even if it is centrally billed. But you can see right here below these name fields, if you click this link here, use name entered in the account owner's information, all you have to do is click that link and then it will copy the name from the above section into the legal name field here. And of course, the only time you would need to change that is perhaps if you have maybe a female employee who's married but she's using her maiden name for business purposes, then you would want to enter her legal last name here. The date of birth and the residential address are optional, so you can leave those blank and skip those fields. The next section is for training certificates. If you, as part of your internal process, would like to gather, let's see, Brenda has a question, same like with William or Bill, printed on the card. Yes, that is a great question, Brenda. If you're using Bill as the account owner's information, it would be a good idea to put William into the legal name area. Yes. And then Tina asks, do you have to send in documentation for name changes? No, you do not. Good question. So if you'd like to collect training certificate information and attach that to the card owner's information here, you do have the ability to upload attachments of training certificates or any other type of training documentation. That is totally optional and up to you based on how you're using the system in your process. Melanie says, for city applications, we currently enter the last 4 of the employee ID for verification purposes. In case the cardholder needs to call into city, will that information still need to be provided? Not specifically, Melanie. What we do for authentication when the cardholder calls in is we would go to that account owner's information section and ask them about the address, phone number, zip code, etc. For verification. Good question. So after the training certificate, see, Michelle says, so no EID is required. Michelle, I am not 100% sure on that. That is a question that would be specific to how State of Colorado is going to be set up in the system. So maybe Michelle Garcia, if you could take that question. She says, no, it is not required. Thanks, Michelle. And Pamela asks, if we are not seeing the training certificate field, how do we get that added to our access? Great question, Pamela. Actually, Michelle Garcia, I'll refer that to you if that's not something that you all are seeing today and you want to get it added. You could certainly talk with your implementation folks and your relationship manager to get that training certificate field added at the organizational level. Great question, Pam. Okay, the next section is for account details. And again, you can zoom in. Down here right below where I'm flashing my arrow, there is a zoom in and zoom out control because I know this page is a bit of an eye chart. So you may or may not see options for expedited delivery. The reporting levels are optional and not something that you need to complete unless you've been specifically directed to do so. And then under the optional fields, you have the ability, not required, but you have the ability to select account active dates. So the way that you would use this is, let's say that you have somebody who's starting work maybe on June 1st, but you want to go ahead and request their card while you're thinking about it. So you could go ahead and request the new card and set up a start date for the card to be active on June 1st upon that person's date of hire, so that even if the card is out there beforehand, it wouldn't be able to be used until that person begins work. There's also an optional end date as well that you could use maybe for in the case of a temporary person or a contractor. If you want the card to be active immediately upon receipt, then you can just skip this section. And scrolling further down, the next section is for default accounting code. So here's where you can enter the default accounting code for all of the charges for this particular card where they should be coded. If you know the numbers, you can enter those, and if not, you can do a search using the magnifying glass and then pick from the list. And keep in mind that these accounting code structure fields are just generic. As an example from our demo system, the ones that you see will reflect the structure of your own organization. And then the next section is for authorization limits. Here's where you will enter the credit limit. You have the option to enter single purchase limits. And then there are additional spending limits available under Show Optional Fields. So if you click this link, you'll see a page that looks like this. Now, up top here, it says, do you want to use the values from the managing account level? So if this card holder should have the characteristics and limits that are set at the managing account level, meaning the standard controls, then you can leave these boxes checked and ignore the whole rest of this section. The only reason why you would want to enter anything on this page is if you're making an exception for this card holder to make their controls different than the managing account level. So you can enter velocity limits if you like. It could either be a dollar amount or a number of transactions, and you can set it daily, cycle, monthly, quarterly, annually, or you can set a particular time frame as well using these date options. And then down here at the bottom is where you can adjust the merchant authorization controls. So let's say that you have maybe a card holder who has a need to make a purchase in a merchant category area that is typically blocked. So you can use this magnifying glass here to search for your merchant category. And then you'll see a search page, and this example has like travel categories because it's a purchasing card. And you can select those merchant categories. Terry asks, what are the cycle dates? I am not sure what your cycle date is. Michelle Garcia, if you know the answer to that, let me know. And Brenda asks, is the custom velocity limits where we could temporarily raise limits and then have them set back to their standard? Great question, Brenda. That is not exactly what that's for. You could use it that way, but we do have an area under card maintenance where you can change the credit limit on a temporary basis and then have it revert. So we'll talk about that when we get to card maintenance. And then Michelle says the cycle dates are the same as they currently are with Citibank. So if you've selected your merchant categories, and you can see the details if you click the Show Details link. So for instance, for the airlines, it would show all the different airlines that are included. Once you've picked your category, you can confirm. And then you'll see a page that looks like this. So let's say that this person, for the purchasing card, let's say at the managing account level that travel categories are blocked because it is a purchasing card. So maybe for this particular card holder, we need to make an exception so that they are able to access those travel categories with the purchasing card as an exception. So once the categories have been selected, then you would choose Approve for your authorization action. And then you would say no to using the managing account controls as the controls for this card holder. So you would say Approve and then no. Now, alternatively, you could use this to create a decline situation the opposite way. So let's say, for instance, that you have a one card and you don't want the individual to have access to those travel categories, but at the managing account level, they are allowed. So you could choose those travel categories again, and then you could select Decline instead. And then it would block those for these particular card holder, even if it's allowed on the managing account level. And either way, you would still say no to using the managing account controls as the controls because you're making an exception for this card holder. So now we're finally at the bottom of this big long page, and we're going to click Next to be able to review the information that we've entered. And now we're on step 3 of 4. So you'll go down the page, each section, and you can see everything that you've entered. There is an edit link at the top of each section in case you need to make any changes. And then you'll submit, and that card request will go through. And you'll see a confirmation with this little job ID number here, which is like a reference number. So from here, you can create another new card account, or you can exit card account setup. And once you've submitted the request, you can go to the request status queue on the top of your main menu on your home page, and you can see the status of any requests that have been submitted up until the point where the card ships. Okay, any questions, any further questions on card account setup before we move on? Let's see. Michelle, I'm sorry, I just saw that you had your hand raised. Anything else to add? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. Let's see. Terry asks, will the state be setting up MCC groups similar to what we currently have? Michelle, that is a question for you, I believe. And then Brenda also asks, will the MCC code groups be pre-populated? The MCC groups should be pre-populated based on the managing account setup, and I would assume that the groups will be similar to what you currently have. Michelle confirms, yes, the templates will be similar to what we currently have. Thank you. All right, so let's take a look at another option because that form that we just went through was kind of long. So we do have an alternate option if you want to save yourself some data entry, and it is called cardholder initiated setup. So the way that this works, there's actually two things, there's two options for it. So option one is without workflow. So this means that you as the program administrator could set up the request, and then the system would send an email to the cardholder to tell them that they need to fill out all of their demographic information, and then the request would come back to you once they've done their data entry, and then you would review it and submit it. Now there's also a workflow option wherein the request would go through a manager in the case of maybe a situation where you want to have approval for a new card account to be opened. So you would go into the system, generate the request, and then it would go to a manager first before going to the cardholder. And that would be in case, again, you want to track any type of manager approval for setting up card accounts. And then in the same manner, at the end of the process, the cardholder would enter all of their information, and then you would have an opportunity to review that and submit it. So let's take a look at how this works. Again, we're under account administration, and instead of clicking new cardholder account, we're coming down here to the middle of the page to create a cardholder setup request. You would select your card type and your hierarchy in the same manner. And then instead of going to the page where you enter all the account owner's information, you'll see that you have an opportunity to enter that cardholder's email address. So if it's going to go straight to the cardholder without the manager approval step, then you would enter the cardholder address here. If you want it to go through a manager for approval, then you would enter the manager's email address here. You also have the option to select a template to pre-populate the fields that you would like to populate so that the cardholder does not have to complete those, and that would be good for things like credit limits and merchant category controls. So after entering that information, you would click Next, and you'll see a confirmation. And then what happens is the system will send 2 emails to the email address. And the first one will be a link to Access Online that's valid for 14 days. And the second one will be an authorization code, and it's sent as a separate email for security purposes. And the cardholder will need to enter that in to begin the process. So any questions on cardholder initiated setup? And I don't think it's shown here, but there is a queue. If you go back to account administration, underneath the setup request link, there is a cardholder setup request queue so that you can track the status of any of those requests that you have sent out to your cardholders. Okay, so I think we covered this under the user profiles class, but I want to touch on it again just to make sure. Oh, Brenda says, does it prompt the cardholder to set up an Access Online account while getting the new card? No, actually, Brenda, it doesn't, and that is kind of a perfect segue, so thank you, to where I was going. So the cardholders will be able to set up their own login to get into Access Online once they receive their card using this cardholder online registration process. And the way that that works is basically you would just need to give them the link to the login page, and then you would need to give them your organization short name. And once they've received their card, then they'll click Register Online here on the login page. And they'll enter their organization short name, their account number, and their expiration date on their card. And then they'll click Send a Code, and then they'll receive an email with a code to enter for security purposes, and they'll enter that, and then they can proceed with the online registration process. And that includes accepting the licensing agreement for use of Access Online, entering their user ID and creating a password, choosing and answering their authentication questions for password reset later, and entering their contact information. So to the earlier question, if you want to make sure that the address that the cardholder is entering is the same one that you used when you set up the account, then you may need to communicate that to the cardholder. Otherwise, it is possible that they could have two different addresses. For instance, if you use a central, maybe head office address to set up the cards, but then the cardholder goes in when they're doing their online registration and puts in their own local address, then it could be two different addresses that show under their user profile. And that's okay. They just need to know that the customer service group or the pay at the pump, where you enter your zip code, is looking for the card account address and not their user profile address. And you can see that under my personal information. Okay, so the cardholder would finish entering their contact information and click continue, and then they will be logged in and taken to the home page. So any other questions on registering online with a card? Okay. Now let's talk about card maintenance. So again, we're in account administration. Oh, Wendy asks, do the cards have a PIN? They do, and it is possible to set your PIN. It doesn't show on this screen, but on the login page there is a PIN link here to manage your PIN if necessary. Great question. So now we're going to talk about card maintenance, and at the top right here there is a maintain cardholder account link. Melanie asks, will we need to do for all current cardholders, the ones being transferred from Citi, or just new ones? Melanie, that is a really good question, and I am not sure of the answer on that. I believe that the cards are being set up in bulk and that each cardholder will need to register their card for an Access Online login, but I will check on that. Let me write that down. And I'll submit that question and have someone get back to you all with an answer. Okay, noted. All right, so once you click on the Maintain Cardholder Account link, the system will ask you to search for the cardholder that you want to maintain. You have the option of entering an asterisk here in the cardholder last name if you want to see a full list of your cardholders. It's the wild card. Unlike other parts of the system where it's a percent sign, here it is an asterisk. Depending on how many cardholders you have, you may or may not want to do that. Or you could just enter, of course, your cardholder's last name. And you do have a link here to update or make changes to the search criteria as well. So here's a list of your cardholder results. And again, there is a show hide data link here so that you can you can use this list here to check or uncheck as much information as you would like to see on the card account list when you see those search results. Okay, Terry asks, is card account registration required? What happens if they don't register the card? Terry, that's a great question. The card account registration is only required if the cardholder will need to go into Access Online and work with their account, such as to approve transactions or do reallocations for posted transactions. It is recommended that they have access to Access Online. Also, it would be beneficial for things like setting up account alerts or notifications and things of that nature. So they don't have to register their card if they're not going to be getting into Access Online at all, but it may be a good idea to have them do that. We don't do allocations, but they will need statements. Okay, thank you, Terry. So yes, to get their statements, they should register online for Access Online so that they can log in and go to account information, and then they'll be able to pull their statements. Michelle says, can a user that was created who doesn't have a card still access the accounts not registered? Let me make sure I understand that question. Can a user that was created who doesn't have a card still access the accounts not registered? If I understand your question, Michelle, I think what you're getting at is, can we see a list of people who have not registered their card? So someone else will take cards online. Okay, so the user that was created, you can go into their user profile and assign the card account to that existing user profile if the cardholder themselves do not need to get into Access Online. So you could have that card account assigned to an existing user profile of someone who doesn't have a card. I hope that answers your question. Melanie asks, cardholders will not have the ability to change their own dollar limits and MCC codes, correct? Yes, that is correct. And Wendy says, will there be literature sent with each card about the steps of registering their card? I do not believe that is the case, Wendy. I don't think that there's any literature sent, so that'll be a communication that you'll want to do internally. Great questions, guys. All right, so we're on our list of cardholders. So whether or not we change our criteria, we can still use the radio buttons here to select the cardholder that we want to maintain. And when you make that cardholder selection, you're going to see a page that looks like this. So the sections are similar to the card account setup page. The difference is, of course, that many of the data fields, well, almost all of them are already completed. So you can see that there are many data fields here with this little pen icon next to it, and that is how you would go in and make a change. So for instance, on account status, it shows open, and if we want to edit that account status, then we would click the pen icon next to that status, and it will give us the ability to make a change. So what happens when you click the pen icon is you get this light blue box. And then you have the ability to use the drop-down box here or the data field, like if you're changing a credit limit, to enter the new information. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can do this with the maintenance. You can either do an immediate change or you can do an effective date change. Now, if you wanted to do an effective date change, the effective date selection is under this Show Optional Settings link. So it looks like this. So let's say that you have someone that is going maybe on a leave of absence or working an alternate job assignment or something, and so we want to temporarily close their account, and that would be the V9 voluntary close. It really should say temporary close, but it says voluntary. So you could select the voluntary close, and then you could enter the effective dates for that leave, and then the card would revert to the open status after the end date. So that is how you would do those changes that can revert. And actually, the system likes it better if you put the dates in first and then change the status. You might see a little error message at the top here if you do it the other way around, and then you'll just have to select your status again. But this is how you can select those dates. Henry says, is there a way for us to temporarily close all card accounts? Yes, Henry, there is. We'll talk about multiple account maintenance towards the end, and there is an ability to put effective dates on those actions as well. So yes, we will get to that. So if you want to have your change happen in real time, then you would just ignore these effective dates, but you can use them. Can you temporary close without the dates? Yes, Tina, you can. The only difference is that if you temporarily close the card without the dates, you will have to go back in manually to reopen it. So I guess technically the answer would be no to that, because any change that you make without using effective dates is going to be the status of the card or the information going forward until you manually change it again. So if it's a temporary closure, I would recommend using the dates. Jeanette asks, if we increase the limit on our main account, will it automatically increase everyone we have selected them to match? Jeanette, I am not exactly sure what you're asking. I think by main account, you mean managing account. Yeah, no, it would not increase each and every cardholder. You would need to increase the managing account limit and then go into the cardholders within that managing account and increase those limits as well. And you can do that as a bulk action. I will show you how to do that. Okay, so if this is a permanent card closure, like the person's leaving the organization, then you would choose T9 terminated. And again, you can select your dates or not based on what you're trying to accomplish. Now, there's an important thing to remember about this light blue box. There's a little X here at the top. And when you see that X, you're instinctively going to be like, oh yeah, I'm done with what I need to do. I'm going to close this. But you do not want to do that in Access Online. So it's a bit counterintuitive. You want to leave this blue box open so that the changes that you just entered will be saved. If you click this X after entering information in this light blue box, it will not be saved. So that's something to keep in mind. So another example, clicking the pen icon here next to the credit limit would give you another light blue box. And you can do this with multiple fields. So like for instance, if you were to click the credit limit box, see it's covering up some of the other things. If you want to select multiple points of maintenance, the information will bump down so that you don't have to do it in multiple actions. So it will adjust. See the single purchase limit is bumped down now here below in case you want to edit that as well. So the light blue box won't cover up anything that you need. And again, you can enter the new credit limit here. If that's going to be a temporary change, then you could select your dates under Show Optional Settings, and you would leave your light blue box open. And it works the same way for additional fields all the way down the page. And of course, you can go to any of these other sections and update or maintain any of the other information for this card account as well. Then you'll click Next at the bottom of the page, and then you'll be able to review what you've just entered. So you'll see the current information here, and in the middle of the page, you'll see what you're changing it to. If you've used effective dates, they will show up right below the new status or limit or whatever it is. And then you'll have a delete or edit link in case you need to revert the change that you just tried to make. But if everything looks good here, then you'll click Submit, and your updates will be submitted in real time. Okay, so let's talk about multiple card maintenance and setup. We do have a bulk setup option. There is a form in Excel that looks kind of like this that you can get from your account coordinator, and then you could, paste in all your cardholder data here and then upload it through the data exchange. And then we would be able to do a bulk setup of those accounts behind the scenes. So that would be, for a large number of cards being set up, 50, 75, 100 cards, something like that. And then as far as maintenance goes, you can maintain multiple accounts using this section here. So it says maintain multiple cardholder accounts, and again, this is on accounts administration. And you have a selection here, so you can select all the accounts in a particular hierarchy position to do maintenance on, or you can select individual accounts. So if it's maybe 2 cardholders, but they're in different parts of the hierarchy, then you could select them as individual accounts versus selecting all the cardholders in a particular part of the hierarchy. And what you can maintain are these things here. The demographic information, which is, the account address, etc. The account information such as the hierarchy position. Let's say that you had maybe a group of cardholders and they were moving from one department to another and you needed to change where they lie in the organization's hierarchy. So you could go to those accounts by hierarchy and update the hierarchy position for all of those accounts with one task. I'm not sure if you all use fleet information, but you can update that here as well. You can also update the default accounting code. And then also under account information is the status. So to the question earlier about closing multiple accounts, you can do that under account information. And then finally, authorization limits. Now, keep in mind that if you're doing maintenance as a bulk task, that you can enter the information that is changing, but it would need to be the same for all the people that you're selecting. So if you had your department maybe and all of the cardholders were going to a new limit and it was the same limit for everyone, then you can increase that limit with the multiple maintenance task. However, if let's say everybody's credit limit was getting increased by 10% and they're all different, that would not work to do as a multiple maintenance task. So let me know if there's any questions on that. Okay, now let's talk about those templates. So you would go again to Account Administration, and the links for templates are here in the middle of the page. You can create a new template, or you can look and view and maintain your existing templates. So we'll look at creating a template first, and you'll be asked to choose the card type and the hierarchy, the same as you typically do. And then up top here, you'll need to name your template and give it a description. And then you can go through any of these sections and complete the information that would apply to this template. Let's see, Terry asks, could I temporarily set everyone to the same limit and then have their limit return to whatever their original was at the end of the temp period? Yes. Yes, Terry, you can do that. With the multiple maintenance, as long as everyone's going to the same limit, then it would revert to whatever it originally was after that temporary period. Great question. So I want to encourage you, if you're going to be using templates, to give them very specific names. For instance, if you have, maybe an IT department and a maintenance department or something like that, you could create a template for each one. You just want to make sure that you name them such that you'll be able to tell them apart later. So after you filled out any of the fields that relate to that template, and the form looks exactly the same as it does when you're setting up a new account, then you'll see a confirmation, and you can create additional templates or you can exit. And to see the templates that you've created, you would go to the Maintain Existing Templates link, and then you'll see a list of all the templates that you've created, and you can either edit or delete them going forward. And you can have up to 25 templates per hierarchy level. Okay, let's touch on the mobile app for a moment. There are some functions that you can do as a program administrator through the mobile app. And it is available, of course, in the App Store for your provider. It would just be Access Online, and you would be able to find it quickly in your App Store. And here's what the kind of login and account search page looks like. So if you've logged in and you want to maintain an account, for instance, there are some actions that you can do from the app so that you can do them on the fly in case you are not at your computer. So you could do your account search, and then you'll see the status, and I know this is kind of small. You'll see the status, you'll see the limit, and then you'll be able to tap on that particular account to make some changes. Let's see, Me asks, after submitted, the account maintain change like credit limit, how long does it take US Bank to update? It updates in real time, Nee. So, you know, unless it's like a huge credit increase that needs a review or something, you know, any other maintenance changes are going to take effect as soon as you save that action in Access Online. Yep, real-time updates. So for instance, here's a little bit larger view of that account in the app, and you can view incomplete maintenance, and that would look like you can use this update button at the top of the account, you can manage limits, or you can manage the status for the temporary closure or permanent closure. And then you also can manage limits, of course. Now, the effective date maintenance is not available in the app, as far as I know. This would just be for kind of, you know, emergency actions. For instance, if somebody left the organization on the weekend and, you know, you weren't in your office and you needed to close down the account immediately, you could do it via the app. Okay, so we do have some reports that will help you with managing your card accounts. If you go under reporting and then program management, there's an account list report. There's also a report that will show you all of the effective date maintenance that you've entered. And then there's also a report down here for history of changes made to accounts via that request status queue based on any changes or requests that have been entered. And here's just an example of what the account list report looks like. So you may have seen it before, but I want to just touch base quickly on our web-based training site. So if you click training from the home page, this web-based training site will open in a new window. And all the materials that relate to card accounts are under the Manage Accounts and Users topic. And the user guide is under this second tab here, Cardholder Setup Account and Maintenance. And you can use any of these other resources as well. And don't forget you have your search box. So you could put card setup in the search box if you're not sure, you know, where it is in the web-based training site, and then it will take you straight to the resources related to card setup or maintenance. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and open it up for final questions. Wendy asks, can PAs add standalone MCCs to cards, or do we have to call to US Bank? You can add standalone MCCs. So if you go to the cardholder maintenance, let's see, let me get to the right page. It would be under this last section, authorization limits, and then it's under the optional fields at the very bottom of the page. So you would be able to do maintenance to your MCCs for that particular cardholder if you need to. Good question. Okay, let me see if anybody's got a hand raised. Any additional questions at all? Got a couple minutes left. All right, well, I will hang on for another moment or two in case anybody has any additional questions. Let's see, Wendy says we need to add spending control limits. Who can assist with this? Spending control limits. Wendy, you can add those under the account maintenance, such as number of daily transactions. That's a velocity limit. So you could go under the authorization limit section here, and then under the optional settings, and then you would see the velocity limits. And does someone need to set up the templates for me? No, you should have access to templates yourself under account administration. Pamela says, do we need to add a template to our cardholder accounts in addition to default coding? You do not have to use templates, Pamela. Those are optional. So it's just something to save you a little data entry if you would like to use templates, but they are not required at all. Clarifying template for our payment system. Pamela, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. The templates are related to this account setup form. So again, they're optional. And Martha says, did you tell us how to merge our cardholder account with our program administrator account? I did not, but you can do that. So if you, Martha, go into my personal information, then you'll see an account assignment option, and then you can add your cardholder account to your program administrator user profile. And Brenda asks, so no core template anymore before assigning the cardholder template. I'm not sure what a core template is, so I'm not sure I can answer that. Michelle Garcia, if that's familiar to you, maybe you could weigh in. And Henry says, if the case of a group card, let's say the cardholder leaves the organization, can we transfer that card to another individual? Yes, absolutely, Henry. You just go in and update the account owner's information and put someone else as the owner of that card. And Brenda, you may want to follow up with Michelle on your question. She has not yet responded. Okay, well, with that, I will go ahead. Oh, Michelle just answered. She says core templates will still be available and should be loaded. Thank you, Michelle. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining today. And again, I'll hang on for another moment and try to answer the last couple of questions here. But other than that, you are welcome to go ahead and disconnect whenever you're ready. We thank you again so much for joining today. Terry says, if I make a name change, will it automatically generate a new card? Terry, I do not believe it does. No, I believe that you would need to request a new card to be sent with the new name. Great question. Okay, everyone. Thanks again for joining. Have a great day.